But to just say that, well, the rule of law is for, wimps, and we don't really need that. We just do what needs to be done, and we actually decide what is in the interest of us and of the world. And I don't think that's the right way to go. And I do think, or hanging over all of this, and rightly so, is the shadow of Iraq. That became a terrible mess. It started off better in the sense that it started off with both Britain and the US going to the United Nations and saying, we are proposing to do this. I mean, we didn't get much of a response from the UN, and they did it anyway. But then it went into the point of, well, you've got rid of Saddam Hussein, now what? And now what was just years of chaos.
Two fantastic people here to chew over the news of the week. I'm Guto Harri, standing in for Ed Vasey, and we're going to be unpacking the politics of the day, from whether Donald Trump really knows what he wants to achieve in Iran, to the backlash to the government's plan to pay asylum seekers £40,000 to leave the UK. We'll try and find some space for some of the fun stuff too. I'm joined by opinion and features editor at City AM, Alys Denby. Good morning.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Are you enjoying this week, or is it deeply traumatic, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. I suppose at City AM we mostly talk about the economic impact of this, and you're just like, it's bad.
That's one word can sum it up. And the former diplomatic editor of the Times, Michael Binyon, 14 countries affected by war and rising, potentially, and the knock-on effect on the global economy and all of that. This is actually bread and butter for you, isn't it?
It is, yes. We're all there, armchair generals, plotting strategy, deciding how we should fix things, war aims and all that.
Right, well, let's start with that then. What are the war aims, as far as you can see? I mean, the toppling of the Ayatollah, happened in the first few hours. It's a little bit of, Hamlet's dead. Why are we still at the theatre?
I think that's a question a lot of people are asking, and a lot now are significantly asking it in America as well. They're beginning to say, well, what is their strategy? How does this end? What is victory? What does Trump actually want to do? I mean, Trump has now said he wants to choose the next supreme leader. I mean, you begin to wonder, does the guy quite know what's happening on the ground and what he thinks is an appropriate role for outsiders in Iran? We don't know. I mean, I think it's just see where it goes. And at some point, I suppose Trump would suddenly say, we've done what we want, we've destroyed their missiles, we've made it impossible for them to develop a nuclear weapon, and that's it, we've won. And then stop. Maybe, or maybe not.
And we'll come to the politics of it in a nanosecond with Alice, but what do you make of where Britain has gone from, very, very clear, only defensive action will be contemplated, and all the implications of that, and an implied criticism of the US with a suggestion that the action is illegal, that it hasn't got a realistic goal and all that, to this morning, David Lammy sort of announcing that the RAF could be bombing sites in Iran itself.
Yes, I think that's pretty unlikely. I don't think that's Starmer's line at all. I mean, if more missiles land on friendly Gulf countries, which is where Britain has more of a responsibility, and particularly if they land on the British bases in Cyprus, then there is a real case for saying we actually need a more aggressive a more vigorous defensive policy. I think the original distinction is right, although a lot of people have poured scorn on it. We are not there as part of the war attack effort. It's not our war, it's Trump's war to some extent. Well, Trump and Israel, and he says he's doing it in the name of the West or of civilization or whatever. But no, I think Starmer has made the right decision. If allies and friends, and indeed Britain, is attacked in any way, or British bases, then do something. Now, whether that means deploy the jets to actually bomb Iran, I'm not sure. And I think Lammy may have said that as a theoretical possibility. I don't think that'll happen, just as I don't think there'll be British boots on the ground at any time.
Right, you said you're not here to pour scorn. What about you, Alice? Do you want to pour scorn on Keir Starmer? I mean, various people have said, one senior MP said he's made an absolute horlicks of this. And, some Labour people just say you can't imagine a situation where you need strong leadership, and great clarity of purpose. And he's been all over the shop.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think that this is a very difficult and murky situation. And I think what you call for most of all in the sort of fog of war is decisive leadership. And that's exactly what we haven't seen from Keir Starmer. I think there's absolutely a case to be made, and Michael's right, that this is an insane war with no war aims. It's just an opportunistic assassination. I think the emerging picture is that Israel had just discovered that these 15 people, including the Ayatollah, were going to be in the same place and had the opportunity to take them out. And Trump was like, well, you're not doing it without me. Fine. You can make the case that Britain should absolutely not be involved in this war. But that's not the case Keir Starmer's made at all. He's kind of gone for this kind of slightly legalistic, oh, it's against international law, oh, but now it's fine that we've been attacked. So it's very unclear. And what are the British people supposed to make of this? I think what you want is moral clarity, and that's not what we've had at all here. And it's made us look incredibly weak in the face of our, still, whatever we think about Donald Trump, our most important ally, the man who is ultimately responsible for the security of our continent.
And he's really annoyed. I mean, he said Keir Starmer's no Winston Churchill. It's a lovely snub, but actually, to be honest, neither is almost any other statesman in history.
Nobody is. I mean,
they're on a par. But if he called him a loser, that's pretty harsh.
I mean, you say that, but he'll call someone a loser one day and a great guy the next. I mean, you talk about he's no Winston Churchill. It's not so much blood, sweat, toil and tears as blood, sweat, toil and care.
Oh, dear me.
Very good. His response should have been, and you're no Franklin Roosevelt.
Quite, yeah.
And he's not. But what do you make of where that leaves us? And Michael, do you think there's a possibility? And, I'm not one of Keir Starmer's greatest fans, as people may have gathered, but will we, when we look back the other side of, dare I say, the fog of war, with a little historical perspective, with a little distance, and think, actually, to try and point out that rule of law matters, that, you need to have, the tone is all wrong, that you can't have regime change from the skies, though clearly they've shown that you can take out a leader from the skies, that we will think, do you know what, he was kind of, if not right, onto something, and we will view him more sympathetically.
Well, I certainly think that the rule of law does actually matter in the long term. I mean, how you define rule of law, I mean, the idea that you can attack somebody because they pose a real threat to your own security, well, that is sort of allowed by the UN, that you can take defensive action if you think you're about to be annihilated or something like that. But it's a bit unclear. But to just say that, well, the rule of law is for, wimps, and we don't really need that. We just do what needs to be done, and we actually decide what is in the interest of us and of the world. And I don't think that's the right way to go. And I do think or hanging over all of this, and rightly so, is the shadow of Iraq. That became a terrible mess. It started off better in the sense that it started off with both Britain and the US going to the United Nations and saying, we are proposing to do this. I mean, we didn't get much of a response from the UN, and they did it anyway. But then it went into the point of, well, you've got rid of Saddam Hussein, now what? And now what was just years of chaos.
What I'm wrestling with, and I'm finding it fascinating, Alice, and I know you're as well placed as anyone to answer this, but is this a sign of a kind of strength in Keir, even if we don't appreciate, shall we say, that he is trying to think methodically and calmly and all the things most people don't do in high adrenaline situations, or is this a sign of ultimate weakness? Because if you read that piece by Tim Shipman this week, his instinct was that we should be with the Americans, at least allow them to use our bases for their planes, and he couldn't get away with that because he had Yvette Cooper and a man who pops up all the time at the moment, Ed Miliband, ganging up against him, and their view ruled the day.
Yeah, I don't think this is a sign of strength. And again, I think if this is just him being calm and methodical and, as you say, making the case for international law, which I do think is important because, how are we supposed to go to Putin and say you can't just invade sovereign territory that's against international law if America can just do whatever it wants? But that's not the case he's making. And as you say, this Tim Shipman piece made it very clear that his instinct was to be with America, and Ed Miliband and other members of the cabinet strongly opposed. I think there's a great quote, petulant, legalistic, and deeply political. And let's not forget, this comes right off the back of this Gorton and Denton by-election, which Labour spectacularly lost. A safe seat for hundreds of years, lost to the Greens by forming a coalition of Muslim voters and a sort of rainbow open borders lefties that handed this seat to the Greens. So Keir Starmer does have, political difficulties at home that are influencing his decision-making, whatever you think. So, no, I don't think this is a sign of strength. I think it's weakness. And I think Ed Miliband is the sort of secret linchpin behind all of this. There's something I like to call the Ed Miliband theory of everything, which is... I
have a funny feeling we need a long lunch to discuss that. but there is, I was just thinking Ed Miliband opposed, the last full-on Gulf War. Mm-hmm. His brother didn't. He was part of the Tony Blair government that backed the Americans. When it came to the leadership that should have been David Miliband's, Ed Miliband, his own younger brother, stood against him and beat him. A lot of people have said, had that gone the other way, David Miliband had won, Labour would have won the election, Ed Miliband won, Labour lost the election, and the history of Britain was different, and whether we'd be out of the EU and all kinds of other things all go down to Ed Miliband being fratricidal.
Look, there's a lot of counterfactuals. I'm not sure I buy this idea that David Miliband had some kind of birthright to the Labour leadership. What I really think is, look, there's many ways you can blame Ed Miliband for things, but I think really the crucial point was back in 2013 when he made a deal with David Cameron saying he would support extending airstrikes on Syria. He then whipped his backbenchers to vote against it. This then meant that what Obama had called a red line in that conflict, which was Assad using chemical weapons against his own people, turned into a completely empty threat, emboldening the West's enemies, making Obama look weak. All sorts of fallout consequences we're still living with today. Other things Ed Miliband has done that make us weaker than we need to be. His moratorium on North Sea oil drilling, for example, is going to make us much more vulnerable to the coming oil price spike. There's no reason we need to do that. We've got our own resources. Why do we need to import it from abroad? Why do we need to make ourselves weaker than we need to be? And let's not forget, it was him who invented this kind of registered voters thing in the Labour leadership election, which meant lots of people could just pay £3 to vote for a next Labour leader, which let in Jeremy Corbyn. All sorts of problems for Labour there. So Ed Miliband is the common denominator in many of Britain's.
As I say, we need a long liquid lunch to pursue that. Just a flavour, Michael, of the knock-on effect of war and the collapse of, diplomatic efforts in the Middle East on the global economy. I mean, we face a lot of uncertainty and pain.
We do indeed. I mean, it's not just energy prices, though they will be affected. And even if the Americans can escort tankers through the Gulf, it won't make much difference because if insurance rates are sky high, not many tankers are going to risk it. So oil and energy prices will definitely be rising. There'll be a shortage. I mean, luckily, we're not quite as dependent on that as we were for our own domestic energy. We have been quite effective in moving to alternative, renewable fuels. It reinforces Alice's point. We need to keep drilling in the North Sea. We've got the oil there if we could get it out. I mean, it's going down in quantity, but we need it. But generally, business in the world is going to suffer from uncertainty. No investor likes uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And the lack of confidence means that a lot of people are beginning to think, well, actually, all these other countries are getting sucked in. They may have trouble as well. Should I put my money here or there? Or where should my exports go? We can't export anymore to the Middle East because they're not going to buy stuff for the moment. It's a worry, and it will have a knock-on effect, and it will, unfortunately, undermine what appeared to be just a tiny little green shoot of economic revival for this country.